a bit.
Very much so. Thank you.
So I suggest to continue while people dropping in slowly, but I think Yannick and I will check the waiting room and let people in as they come back. So welcome back to our second and final session for today. So now we would like to introduce to you 3 examples of how aspects of the Bildung concept can be used or can be found in projects from Germany, Spain, and Denmark. And I would like to start to invite my colleague Maike Woller from DVV International to introduce to us a project called Adult Educators as Change Agents, and explain a little bit how this contributes to a more holistic way of delivering adult learning and education. So Maike, you have like 10-12 minutes, and maybe then we have the opportunity for 2-3 questions or comments if you want. Are you able to share, or Yannick, are you able to share your screen, or is it Yannick?
I try, yeah.
Yeah, or is
yeah,
it
okay. I think I will try. Yeah, thank you, Uwe, and hello, everybody. So I will try to share the presentation. Can you see it?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Just one moment. Okay, so yeah, I would like to give you a brief insight into the learnings of the 2 projects, Curriculum Interculturale and Building Educational Bridges, where we dealt with the question how to create safe, appreciative learning spaces for refugees. And both projects were created due to the observation that migration processes like integration, flight, but also return and reintegration of refugees have a big impact on education systems and also a big impact on participants of adult education courses. And in Germany, we saw with our adult education centers that educators were quite challenged to work with multicultural groups and also with participants with trauma and psychosocial problems, and also with participants with very different educational backgrounds. So that was why we created an intercultural didactical qualification that should strengthen the intercultural, didactical, and psychosocial competencies of adult educators working with refugees. And it should help them to be able to better create appreciative, safe, integrative learning spaces. And the most important characteristic would be that those learning spaces should foster empowerment and agency, especially because refugees experience feelings of powerlessness, insecurity, and vulnerability back in their home countries during flight, but also during the integration process in Germany. So adult education courses can be a good space where their self-esteem can be strengthened, and also a space where the educators can help them focus on their skills, needs, and wishes. And from our point of view, that's as important as passing on specific content-related knowledge, for example, in the German language, because only if the learning conditions are addressed to the refugees' needs, they are open and able to learn something different. The starting point of both projects was that we observed that we have the same target group in our international work as in our work in Germany. So we work especially with Syrian refugees in Jordan for a longer time, but also with a lot of Syrian refugees and other refugees in adult education courses in Germany, for example, German language courses, orientation courses, integration courses, and so on. Our approach of the project was that we wanted to use the international knowledge methods and also educational approaches and use them to tackle the challenges in integration work in Germany, not the other way around, how it often happens, that we export things we do in Germany to other countries. We compiled a team of international experts and trainers from diverse cultural backgrounds from Jordan, Palestine, Iraq, Turkey, and Germany, who developed a training course for adult educators as well as teaching and learning materials to better work with refugees. Yeah, we asked ourselves different questions during the process of the conception of the training course. Firstly, what does education mean in the context of migration? It's about understanding the impact that migration has on educational systems, especially on the non-formal education system, but also to focus on the power that education can have in that difficult context. Then we asked ourselves, who am I as an adult educator? It's about reflecting on the own role as educator, especially also on the cultural imprint that we all have and how that influences the work with refugees. Then we also asked, who are my students? To reflect the own view you have on refugee students, also prejudices, for example, and yeah, take into account the different learning biographies refugees have, depending where they come from, and also their different cultural backgrounds and psychosocial challenges that have a big impact on the courses themselves. And last but not least, we asked, how can we learn together? How can we implement courses with interactive participatory methods that are geared to the refugees' needs? Yeah, there you see an overview of the topics of our training course. Most adult educators were very interested in getting to know more about how to deal with trauma and psychosocial problems in the classroom, because it accounts for most of refugees that they experience something during flight, also back in their home countries. Also, how to deal with cultural commonalities and differences, because educators often perceive that, yeah, or they think that cultural differences are a source for conflicts in the courses. Then also to reflect on one's own prejudices and stereotypes, and also the impact of language, because discrimination often speaks from words. Then we also have a very interesting concept, the concept of storytelling. It's about reinterpreting the life stories in a new and positive way. So deconstructing harmful narratives and reconstructing positive ones, which is closely connected to empowerment. And last but not least, in the course, we reserved quite a lot of time for passing on and trying out participatory methods. Yeah, like I said before, we worked with different educational approaches, which were brought in by the experts coming from different countries. So it's not the German view, but the view of the international team. Firstly, we worked with the concept of multi-collectivity. It's a concept that doesn't only focus on differences between cultures, but on commonalities, and that sees the plurality of modern societies more as an advantage and not as a disadvantage. Yeah, mostly we focus always on nationality or cultural regions when we deal with multicultural groups, but multi-collectivity more says that we belong to numerous collectives and nationality is only one of them. And I think it's a very important approach for working in multicultural groups, because it aims at creating a shared common ground for working together. Then we worked with the participatory approach and empowerment. I think it's a well-known approach to all of you. It's a learner-centered approach that focuses on skills and potential of learners. And when working with refugees, like I said, it's especially important because refugees experience a lot of powerlessness during flight, but also when arriving in Germany, because they are most times in a loop of waiting and waiting for their life to restart. And yeah, if adult educators can manage to transform them from passive observers to active participants in their courses, it can make a big impact. because this classroom experiences that they are listened to and that they can bring in their own background encourages them to continue restructuring their own life in the classroom and also beyond. So it's also closely linked to the concept of active citizenship. And then we worked also with the concept, the trauma-sensitive classroom, which I said is very interesting to most of adult educators. And this concept says that adult educators, they are not counselors, obviously, but still they can try to identify signs and symptoms of trauma of their participants in the classroom. They can use basic principles of working together with individuals of vulnerability. So mainly it's about communication, as how to communicate trauma sensitively. And also, like I said, to help reconstructing positive narratives of their participants. Yeah, also brought some examples how we transferred this educational approaches to the method level. So we created a toolbox with methods for classes with refugees. It can be used with refugees, but also with all heterogeneous groups, also with participants with migratory background, for example. And the methods are all geared to the phases of group formation, because we said that a strong group is a very positive thing for the learning atmosphere, no matter in which course. So the first method I want to introduce is things that we share, finding common ground. It's a method that aims at supporting the getting to know each other at the start of a course, which is very important for the appreciative, integrative learning atmosphere. Then we have another method. We write a text, including stories of the participants, where the goal is enhancing the group feeling. It's closely connected to empowerment, because the idea is that in the method, the life stories of the participants are talked about and used so they can connect to their own life circumstances. Then we have another method, the power of breathing, relieving tension. The goal is to create a safe learning atmosphere. Safe always refers to dealing with trauma and psychosocial challenges in the classroom. That's, for example, a really brief method, a 5-minute method, where it's about listening to your breath and calming down. It can be integrated in a course on a routine basis, for example, like every day, 5 minutes at the beginning or end. And we all know that trauma has an impact on the ability to concentrate and to focus, and such a method can help to refocus as a group and to better concentrate afterwards. The next method is also a method that creates a safe learning atmosphere. It's shifting direction, enhancing attention and nonverbal communication, and also supports the concentration. Then we also work with a lot of different feedback methods. For example, any energy left, direct and fast energy level check, where the goal is obviously to receive feedback. We have a lot of different feedback tools that work with visualized feedback and non-verbal feedback because of the language barriers of refugees, but also because of the different communication styles due to different cultural backgrounds. So we mostly work with direct feedback in Germany, but that can be culturally wise difficult for refugees because they rather give indirect feedback. Yeah, that was just a brief insight into the methods we work with. Like I said in the beginning, we have vast training and teaching materials that were created in the project. That can be used for qualifying adult educators working with refugees, but also working with a lot of different diverse groups. And also we have this toolbox that can be given directly to educators for working with those methods in the classroom. So far, we are in the process of also translating both manuals, teaching and learning materials, and they will also be ready in January next year and can be downloaded from our site. They are open educational resources, so they can be used in a lot of different contexts, can also be adapted to different target groups and used in a different way. Yeah, that was the brief insight in 10 minutes, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Maike, for giving us this very small glimpse into your work, impressive work of the last years. And there was a question in the chat: is it possible to get hold of the materials? So you just answered this question, I guess, already. And as it comes from Dr. Sabine Koppe from VHS Vorpommern, I think you can send us an email as well. I think there are even some hard copies in German language available. Is that true?
Yeah, in German language for both projects, we have still hard copies, but like I said, yeah, will be also available as download in German and English. And Curriculum Interculturale is more for working in the field of integration with refugees. Building educational bridges is more for working with refugees that might have to go back home, so return to their home countries, which is an even more challenging field because of even more psychosocial problems and trauma of having to go back.
Thank you so much. So the floor is open. We have a few minutes for questions. Is there anybody from the audience who would like to ask or comment? Yes, Ms. Koppe?
Well, what is the feedback from the students, from the participants? Because I think the tools, the methods you're using seem to be really interesting. I would love to know how they react.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good question, and I'm also interested in this answer, but unfortunately, to know that is out of the scope of our project because our target group were the adult educators, and we did a lot of different courses for them in the last 3 years. So we can only say something about how their view changed and how their attitude changed due to taking part in the course. And we have very positive feedback from them. But it would be really interesting, like in 1-2 years' time, to test also the students how the atmosphere changed for them. But unfortunately, like I said, we don't have insight into that. But it's the main question, obviously. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this important question. Anybody else would like to ask Maike something? No? Then I suggest we come to our next speaker, which is Jaume Vidal, from a member more or less from a member organization of AC4 in Catalonia. He will introduce us to a project called Non Som Kurz, We Are Not Short. So the floor is yours, and you can try to share the screen as well.
Well, you can see the screen?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Jaume Vidal, and I am a trainer at Lopon Adult Training Center of Gentis Foundation. Today, I come to present our project, and it's called No Som Kurz. The English meaning is We Are Not Short. One moment, I cannot. Yeah. We are from Catalonia. This is our key services are job foundation services, vocational training services, educational services, services for companies, entrepreneurship and social economy services, and community mediation services. Our goals are like this. Our good practice has been implemented at Lopon Adult Training Center. And Lopon is an integrated center that provides both adult education and vocational education services. And both formal and not formal trainings, it's aimed either to the return to the formal education system and facilitating access to employment of young adults aged between 16 and 24 years old who suffered social exclusion or they are in risk of suffering it. Yeah. And so now let me present the good practice. No, some course in English, we are not short of, like I said, and we are not dummies. No, we call this project we are not short because in our language, short, besides being a short video, it's also a derogatory adjective to designate people who like studies and skills or competencies. No. With this series of videos, young people want to claim that they are not sure and that despite the difficulties and their environment, and they are aiming to have a better life. Not some course. This project consists in making our young people and society in general aware of current problems in society. And through a series of short films made and produced by young people, we aim to give visibility to these issues. And furthermore, we want to promote teamwork, creativity, initiative, participation, and communication among young people. The goals are the goals to achieve in the project are accompany the young people in identifying aspects of improvement and to provide young people with the tools and strategies for self-knowledge and effective relationships and for the correct development in everyday life to make young people and society aware of current problems facing society, to promote creativity, initiative, participation, and reinforce teamwork. And after you will see. And this project consists of this is not some course, we are not sure, is a path to learn using art. Using art like a way, using art not like a goal, like a way to learn. A meeting point to work critical sense, a tool through which to discover tech and deep capabilities, yeah, and an educational art project integrated in the class. The keys Number one is participation. No? And young people know what critical themes or topics are interesting for them. And if the tutor proposes some themes or topics, they have the capabilities to choose something that can mean to the topics or for youngsters can vary. And it can be drug abuse or equality, something, sometimes topics in the environment. The only premise is to choose a topic through which young people can influence. Okay, number two is everyone is a world champion in a skill. And each student can play a different role in the project. Maybe we can imagine an actor, maybe a woman as a director, or a production group. The camera could be you, or I won't be the narrator. Everything is possible. No? Success key number three. Young people, or methodology, no? Young people need to see results quickly, and the easiest way is to think from the biggest from the smallest. No? After choosing the topic, we play around the table to write a short synopsis. It's time to let your imagination fly and get closer and closer, adding small details slowly to set up the final script. Meanwhile, dialogues are growing, and some young people contribute to this by writing. Finally, the production has fantastic moments while looking for resources to make a realistic scene. And recording is often a moment of stress and adrenaline when embarrassment, humor, fears, and other things arise. It's very interesting to analyze this moment because it's a real challenge for them. Success key number 4 is the end of the project is not the goal. The road is the important thing. Process is the goal. No? We need to analyze the process to find out what they have learned. Let me show one short film, 4 minutes only. I have 4 minutes. Yes. And what is behind these 3 short videos produced by a young group of students? Let me show the keys to get a good success. And one moment, if I can, yeah. Only 4 minutes, please. This is the result. This is about bullying. A few
Thank you.
weeks later.
Yes. Oh.
One moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jaume, for this impressive presentation and
As I said, it's not the goal, it's not the product, the output. It's not important if not the
Yes,
process.
yes,
It's more
yes.
important the process.
Anyway, it gives us a very good impression on how you use art to allow the young people to express themselves and to do this within some other exercises, which, as I understood, are focusing on vocational and skills development. So this is, I think, a good example for what Lene presented in her rows, that we have to interconnect the different parts of development of education.
Yes.
Are there any questions or comments from the group? Yes, Katharina? Yes,
I
Katharina?
am very
Yes.
proud that Jaume has been selected because we are talking about Bildung and Nordic Bildung and the northern countries. And we are very proud that you selected an example of something from a southern European country. And thank you very much. And thanks, Jaume, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Werner, in a second. I think, Katharina, will be one of our challenge to make the Northern European concept useful for Southern and Eastern Europe as well. We live in one Europe. We have various traditions which we should communicate to each other, and so I think it is very deliberately, and I think what Jaume presented may come from another wording and concepts, but it actually has a lot in common with what Lene presented earlier. But Werner would like to share, and then Mr. Tippelt.
Thank you very much, Uwe. Jaume, I just would like to know, from what I've understood, it is a project that really helps to strengthen available capacities of participants and to cherish them to a certain extent and help them in a kind of self-empowering process. And so I discover very clearly basic principles of adult education with regard to participatory approaches and empowerment as a kind of key goal of it. I just want to know, how do you reach your participants? What motivates them to come to you? How do you find them, and how do you recruit them? How do participants find you?
Jaume, I would like to suggest that Professor Tippel will ask his question, and then you can answer to both questions.
That was exactly my question as well. I would like to know how do you come to this target group? How do they come to you? What are the reasons? Is it a specific group recruited from specific institutions? Yeah, a little bit more about the group itself. Yes, thank you.
The group is
Thank you very much
part.
for the impressive presentation. It was very interesting.
Thank you very much. The group is a part of students of CPA Lopon. It's an adult training center. They are, yes, they are young, but they are more of 18 years, and they are only students of the center, from center. Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes.
And we think that art, it's not a art craft, no? Art is a vehicle to know, to empowering the young people, and in this case, adult students.
Thank you very much, Jaume, for this impressive example. And I would like to move to our next and final speaker for today, Caroline Magdalene Meyer from the Danish Association for Adult Education, who will present us a project called Danish Storytelling.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll just try and share my screen, see if I let's see if I can share my screen. Yes, I think I can. So can you all see my screen now? Okay, I don't know if you can see what's written in the gray area, because I can't see it all, but what I've written is on top is the title of our very kind of small pilot project that we've done throughout the late spring, early summer this year in DFS, the AEA, where I'm the general secretary. It's the Danish National Association for Adult Education. The name of this little pilot project is, I've called it Danish storytelling here. It's really the right translation, because we call it in Danish Denmark fortæller, which would be translated directly into English, Denmark tells stories. That's why I've also written it in German, Dänemark erzählt, and in Spanish, actually, Dinamarca cuenta historias. So this is just to let you know that the name is a kind of very Danish in its formulation. So the background for our little pilot project was that it was the lockdown due to the COVID-19 crisis. As most European countries, Denmark was totally locked down from the 11th of March and a few months ahead. And what happened was that in Denmark, in the Danish adult education tradition in Denmark, it's very common for us to use physical places to meet. I know it's very common for the rest of you as well, but it's very common to go to debates, social gatherings, having these physical meeting places, evening classes in also the folk high schools, where you can debate current political traditions, whatever you want to talk about. So this was shut down. There was no possible way of meeting up physically. And that's why the lockdown hit very hard in a society where this is very common to go and meet up with other people. So we talked about how can we do something that's fast and efficient in order to prevent loneliness by creating a kind of a space for coherence and sense of belonging that would be virtual instead of physical, now that we couldn't meet physically. And of course, also we had a special attention to people who were vulnerable, who would be even more lonely maybe than they would be already by being isolated in their homes. So the concept was that we created online storytelling communities. And the online storytelling communities would be 5 different groups, you could say. In each group, there would be around 15 or 20 people participating. And these are online groups. Every group would meet once a week for 5 consecutive weeks. And it would be for 1.5 hours each time. And in the group, there would be hosts that would lead the group storytelling work or process. And in the groups, we introduced every week a new topic. For instance, one topic was a Corona story. What's your Corona story? How's the Corona or COVID-19 situation affecting your life? But it could also be issues or topics like courageousness. When have you done something that's made you feel courageous in your life? Or tell us about a love story. It could be a love to a dog or a family love or a partner love or whatever. So we'd have topics every time that the group session would circulate around. And as I said, around 20 participants, they would start up together, actually like we do now in Zoom. Everybody would start up together in one common room, be introduced to the topic of the week, and then they would split out into smaller groups in order to have time to tell stories. So the smaller groups would be like 4 or 5 people in each group. And then they would meet up again in the end of the session. Why did we do this, and why particularly these storytelling meetings virtual? You could do a lot of things virtually, and a lot of things have been done virtually other than this. But what we did was that we were very inspired by 3 things, you could say. One is the approach to storytelling that's inspired by indigenous people from North America. And in this tradition, stories are used to respond to other people's stories. Also, it's very common to use a physical object. So they would also bring physical objects to our meetings. They would be asked, for next week, could you please bring a physical object that means something to you? And then they would tell a story on basis of this physical object. And also in the tradition from indigenous people, it's very important that you don't judge other people's stories. You don't try to interpret what are they really what is this an example of? Oh, what does this say about the person? You just listen, and then you resonate the story. So instead of kind of judging the story or giving your opinion to the story, what you tell back, your way of responding, is that you tell the rest of the group, how did your story affect me? What did it make me think of? What emotions did it bring up in my inner life? And this was a very important aspect because you didn't want people to be judging each other. So also we were inspired by Hannah Arendt, the German philosopher, about the thing that developing stories together make us ethical human beings, and it makes us democratic citizens as well, and it counteracts loneliness and populism. So the tradition from Hannah Arendt was also important for us in our way of making this process possible, you could say. And in the end, also the narrative theory. Of course, this is a storytelling project, so we were very inspired by classical narrative theory, that you are formed as a human being through telling your stories. I believe that if you remember something of the things that Lena said this morning also about the narrative aspect of us understanding ourselves in the light of our history, is a very important part of narrative theory. Grundtvig actually said in one of his writings, he says that you cannot make rules for the perfect life. You can only see it whilst it develops. So this is also an inspiration for us, that there's no need or we don't really want these rooms to be a place where people tell each other better ideas than those that people come with, but that you learn through life by living life. So we learn each other how to live life by telling each other stories. Yes, and also a narrative approach and a narrative perspective is that it's very much about telling details. So in narrative theory or the history of narrative theory, you're not really, the things that you would think are not of interest for the rest of them because they're little details and you think this is not important. It is. So we inspire people in these communities, the virtual storytelling communities, to be very sensitive about telling also the little things, maybe describing very vividly the rooms they were in or the situations that they were talking about, because it's also a way of making us sense each other as human beings instead of just listening to each other's ways of viewing the world. And then at the end, yes, as I said before, we learned also that the participants to witness each other's stories instead of evaluating each other's stories. So the ideal of witnessing a story is very important to this storytelling approach. And I'll come back to that later. We had a tremendous success with this little pilot project. It was very little. It was just these 5 communities in 5 weeks. And now we're trying to seek funding in order to actually broaden it out so that we can do it much more, because we just had, well, I have a meeting with the Ministry of Culture now at 12:30 because Denmark was just locked down again a few days ago. So now we're in the same situation in most of the country as we were in the spring. So we're actually trying to make this broader so that more people can maybe try to be a part of one of these virtual storytelling communities. But when Lena talked before, what made me think was also, Lena said this about that Bildung having to do with 2 kinds of knowledge. That was a transferable knowledge, and the other knowledge would be this knowledge that would be emotional knowledge about how to be human in the world. The insights about the way of living in the world. And I think that our little pilot project about the storytelling communities is very much something that speaks into this second way of knowledge. So this has nothing to do about transferable knowledge. It's really a way of trying to tell each other how we feel by being a existential human being in a difficult world, or sometimes a difficult world. Just to finish up, the unexpected perspectives or effects that it had was that a big theater in Copenhagen heard of our project, and they came to us and said, we'd like to make a theater play that tells the stories of the Danish people from the Corona lockdown period. And they said, can we do something so that we can get kind of your stories? And we didn't really record the stories in the first part of it because it wasn't meant to be something that should be documented. So what we're doing now is with this not the National Theatre, with this theatre in Copenhagen, is that we're doing one more round of virtual storytelling communities, but this time they're filmed. And also there are 2 screenplay writers who participate, and then they take out the stories that they find most interesting or most radical or most emotional, and then they write them into screenplay manuscripts, or not screen, but theater manuscripts. And then they'll do some trials next year, but in the season 2022, so this is in 1.5 years, they'll be ready with a theater play that is based on the Corona stories from the Danish people. And I think I'm very happy about that perspective, because that way our little pilot project is actually bounded together with cultural expressions through this theatre. And also the Danish National Museum will be including some of these stories into their permanent collection, because they'll have a permanent collection part that has to do with the Corona period in Danish history. So in that way, a little pilot project turned out to be something that's also going to be historically documented. But this is just a way of trying to explain how we can very efficiently, in short time, actually do something that reaches out in times when it's difficult to meet, but also something that's really based on the Nordic tradition for Bildung and shared communities. So I think that will be, I don't think I have any more. No, that will be my last word. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for this impressive presentation. May I ask you to close?
Yeah, somebody did that for me.
Perfect. I think that was very inspiring and something I think we all can somehow take on board, or many of us, because it's really it sounds like a little exercise, but with a quite big impact. So anybody would like to comment or ask a question on Carolina's presentation? Yes, Ms. Koppe, please.
That sounds really like something I would love to do. I'm very impressed. But here comes the question. How and where did you get the funding for this project? Maybe you have mentioned it and I didn't catch it, but I'm also an administrator and I need to talk about finance.
Yeah, well, first of all, I forgot to mention that what was also quite interesting in this project was that it was kind of cross-generational. So we had a very 17-year-old boy who would tell about his childhood love to his dog, and we have people who were 85 telling about long lifetime stories. So good that these generations would meet across generations. People would meet across generations. About the funding, we funded it in my organization myself. We had, because of the lockdown, we had some money that was supposed to be used. There's a big folkemøde, folk meeting in Bornholm, which is a Danish island, every year, where all of civil society and a lot of politicians and everybody meet up. And it was cancelled. So the money we had set off to that, we used it for this project. But as I said, we can't fund it broader or more broad than we've done by now. So if we want to kind of get it out and live even more, we need to find funding. And we're trying with external funds here in Denmark.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or remarks from the audience? Yes, Professor Tippel, please. Yes, you have to unmute. Professor Tippel, you have to unmute.
I said, thank you very much for this wonderful project and your presentation. One question, storytelling, sometimes I had the feeling it's so close to therapy. where is the border between storytelling and therapy?
That's true. It's very close to, and I think that some therapy is also based on narrative storytelling. I know that there are schools doing therapeutical educations based on the storytelling concept. So, but if you compare it to cognitive therapy, traditional psychological therapy, the big question is there's no evaluation. So it's the thing is that the sense of resonance is so important to the narrative storytelling. So it has to do with what does your story create of resonance in me? What movements does it make in my inner head? What does it make me want to do? So your story kind of is an inspirational source for me to develop as a human being. So that's and I think I'm not a psychologist, I'm a sociologist by training, so I don't know a lot about psychology. But therapy maybe traditionally is more about giving each other more kind of tools or good advice as to how to react to some specific situation. So that would be my very short answer. And therapeutic effects are perhaps welcome. Somebody says, yes, I agree. I just wanted to answer another question somebody wrote in the chat, which was, how did you find the participants? And very briefly, we used our member organizations. We're an umbrella organization. We have 35 members within Danish folk building communities, adult education organizations. So we just used them and said, find us some participants, and they did. So in that way, it wasn't that difficult.
Thanks again, Carolina, for this impressive project, which is, I mean, cross-cutting to many aspects we discussed and to other aspects, as Professor Tippel just mentioned as well. And this is, I think, at the core of what we discussed, that we would like to link different aspects and different purposes even of Bildung. So as we're coming to an end of this day, first of all, I would like to apologize again for the confusion about the link. And I think, Hans-Georg Rosenstein, I think our colleague will send, to be on the safe side, the link for tomorrow once again to all of the participants by email would be my suggestion. I shared it already in the chat, but to be on the safe side, I think I would like to suggest that Ms. Herrmann this afternoon sends it around again to the list of participants.
Yeah,
so,
and just
yes?
have a look into your email account tomorrow morning. If maybe we will have another one. And no. We will send it in the afternoon again, but I'm quite sure that it will be the right one that you have already received.
And as a final, I would like to give Ingrid Schürl the floor for some final remarks and reflection on day one. Please, Ingrid.
Yes, thanks, Uwe. But it will be very, very short remarks. And thanks again to Germany, to Spain, to Denmark, to Maike, to Choma, to Carolina for their really interesting inputs from different perspectives. And a special thank to Lena Andersen and to Professor Tippelt. I would like to quote two sentences from Lena Andersen and from Professor Tippelt for tomorrow's discussion, which seemed to me personally very, very interesting from different perspectives. The first one is, Bildung can help to be a better author of your life. Bildung can help to be a better author of your life. It came from Lena Andersen. And the second one, which is really crucial for our daily work in the German adult education centers, and I think in all our centers, as I look on the presentations, Bildung is absolutely necessary, more than ever, to foster and to create social cohesion. And these two sentences for me are really key sentences for tomorrow's discussions. For me, I think for you, perhaps there are other remarks you can remember. And I hope really, in the name of all the people who organized this conference, to see you back on screen tomorrow. It is really a bit of Zoom fatigue, which we all have in these times, but please come back to the screen. You have seen some pictures from our Haus der Bildung. It's really called Haus der Bildung in Bonn. And you will see more pictures tomorrow. I regret deeply that we couldn't meet in Bonn, but these pictures teachers, you perhaps have an idea to visit our house after the pandemic. But tomorrow I will be very, very happy if you all come back to the screen. Have a good day and see you tomorrow again.
So goodbye and see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.